Well, it's August 15th. We're halfway through the month. Time's ticking. We're 2 weeks away from John Akuti's big conference. He's needing $500 more. So be praying about that. The ministry is completely different than what other ministries are. Many ministries are about taking in money. Everything that John Akuti does is about giving. And I'm grateful for that. Sure, thankful for the way that he is leading. Truly a servant heart. So be praying for that, as well as all the other specific requests. Tonight, what I want to do is I want to take you on an adventure in Deuteronomy chapter 10 in the Torah portion Ekev. And I want to build it for you in such a way that if you were drawing it on a piece of paper, then you would have a picture that would be very clear. Because I want to share with you some things that, though you know the story and you know it very well, I want to show you some nuances of the story that will open up a greater understanding about what's going on in your life and how to deal with things in your life. As I shared with a person earlier this week, having Bible study is great. Having a Monday night, a Friday night, a Shabbat morning, a Wednesday night, a Sunday morning Bible study, those are all great. They're fantastic. But if I don't start putting this stuff into practice, as Lozelle was just saying, hey, we better be on our A game. We need to be ready to rock and roll without the band. And if we can do that, then let's get after it. Let's do what the Lord wants us to do, and let's be purposeful. Now, before we get into chapter 10, I'm going to take you back to the beginning of the Torah portion of Ekev, back in chapter 7. So go to chapter 7 and look at verse 12. Now, I'm going to have you make notes about this because if I don't get this part right, then really the rest of it really doesn't carry much weight. But if I get this part right, then the rest of it will carry tremendous weight. The opening verse to this Torah portion, which in chapter 7, verse 12, is directly connected to verse 11. And that's why he says wherefore in verse 12. So anytime you see wherefore, for, or therefore, you have to ask what it's there for. Based on what I just got done telling you, I'm building upon that concept. The concept that he's building upon is in verse 11. You shall therefore keep the commandments, guard the commandments, guard the statutes and the judgments, which I command you this day to do them. Wherefore, because you're going to do them, if you will do them, if you will Ekev, if you will walk in the steps and you will follow them, if you'll guard them. That word for keep is the word shamar. And if I was going to spell it like phonetically, it'd be S-H-E-M-A-R, shamar. And it means to guard. To guard. Let's say I've got something really valuable here in the cottage, and somebody tries to take that. Well, I'm guarding that so that nobody can come in and steal it. Nobody can come in and take it. Nobody can do any of that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to protect it. That's exactly what Moses is telling the people. If you will guard these commandments, if you will guard these statutes, if you will guard these judgments, then I'm telling you, there's some really good stuff that's going to happen. And in verse 12, he says, then the Lord himself will keep you in covenant. And you'll say, well, didn't you teach on this on Monday night? And I'll remind you, yes, I did. But what I didn't share with you is this. Now look at verse 12 carefully. Wherefore, it shall come to pass if you hearken to these judgments. Now, in the Hebrew language, just like in English and just like other languages, when I said, hey, you guys are doing great. Obviously, I'm using a plural word when I say you. I hope you understand. I'm not just talking to one person. I'm talking to you plural. Well, the word for if you hearken is plural. So he's not just talking to one individual, he's talking to the entire nation collectively, the entire second generation. That's going to be important. If you will hearken, if you will listen, if you will shema, if you will hear and obey, if you as a group will do this, then notice what he goes on to say. And you keep them, you guard them, and you do them. That word for do is asa, which means to use my personality with the Word of God and to express the Word of God through the person that I am. I don't have to change who I am. A little on the silly side, the master of the obvious. I'm me. I don't have to be you. I don't have to be anybody else. I can just be me. So the commandments of God, what do they look like coming through my life? Well, the commandments of God, what do they look like coming through your life? The very first, if you will diligently keep and do these, then he goes on to say that the Lord your God shall keep unto you the covenant and the mercy which he swore unto your fathers. Now, do you see the word for thee in King James? Your version may have it a little bit more personal. And he shall keep unto you the covenant. Now, that word is not plural, it's singular. Huh? So he's talking to an entire assembly, saying, listen, boys and girls, if you will all link arms, join together, find strength, mutual encouragement with one another, then what I'll do is individually, I'm going to keep covenant with you. Oh, I'm not going to overlook you. I'm going to keep individually. That's why, there is tremendous power in numbers. Have you ever noticed in your own journey? Have you ever noticed that when you've got a large group of people together, all focused on one task, how much easier the task is? Have you ever tried to do a task or you feel like you're doing a task all by yourself? Wow. Yep. Been there, done that. I think I prefer working together with a group with the same task, knowing that I have a very valuable role within that process. So I'm going to give the group my very best effort because I know he's not just keeping the group in covenant, he's dealing with me because he has to do it individually, keep covenant with you individually, not just as a group for a reason. So let me explain. When I was a teacher, back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had a new type of learning that was being introduced into the school setting. It was called cooperative learning, where you would put together 4 or 5 students to work on a project to teach them how to cooperate with one another. The challenge for the teacher was that some of the kids in the group were dynamic and all in. And others of the kids were just hanging on to the coattails looking to get an A because everybody else did the work. So then you had to come up with specific rules to make sure that everybody was participating. But even with everybody participating, even then, not everybody's doing the same amount of work. Do you understand now? In verse 12, he says, wherefore, if you, it shall come to pass, if you will diligently guard and do, the group, everybody together, then I, the Lord said, will keep you individually in covenant. What an amazing God. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important to be a part of a fellowship. If you're not part of a fellowship like where you can gather, then how important it is to make sure that you're connected to somebody, maybe through a video, through a Zoom call, through watching a service, however you do it. It's so important because community is essential. And as we had a specific prayer request before we started recording, one day when the greater exodus comes, and I'll guarantee you, the greater exodus is coming. When it comes, you're going to find people that they don't know up from down, left from right. But they know that where they've been is not the right place. And you and I are going to have had developed leadership during this time so that when that time comes, you're ready to do whatever needs to be done. Because you're going to be responsible, like Moses, to be able to help people who don't know their left hand from their right hand, to be able to help them walk straight. For people who've come out of situations where they've just been beat up, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, physically, relationally, or financially. And you're going to have wisdom so that they want to grab a hold of your coattails and say, I know you know the way. They'll grab a hold of your tzitzit and say, I know you know the way. And then you'll lead and you'll take them to the destination that they're supposed to go. The beginning of this Torah portion, Ekev, which is the word where we get a heel from. So every step you take is heel toe, heel toe, heel toe. Everywhere you walk, you're going to get this out here because you walked towards it. If you will do this, then this. If you keep walking here, you're going to get this. Because you got that, it's because you walked like this, a kev, in the heels of. I thought about tonight talking about Jacob and how Jacob's name literally means heel. And I thought about talking about Jacob and how when he came out, he reached up and he was grabbing the heel of Esau, who was trying to crush his head. He wasn't just grabbing, saying, hey, pull me out, brother. No, Esau has been trying to crush his head. Esau was a full-grown hairy man. Listen carefully, with your heart open in the deepest way. Esau was a full-grown hairy man at birth. And the reason why he was hairy, and the scriptures describe that, is because it tells us from the time of his birth, he was like a full-grown man. He was not teachable. He couldn't learn. Personally, I'd rather not be a hairy man when I'm born. And when I was born from above, I don't want to be a hairy man. I do want to go through the puberty stages of spiritual growth and then get body hair. But I want to change. When Yaakov came back, Yaakov, the root is a kev, heel. When he grabbed the heel, he was protecting his head, which was taking us back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. When Yahweh, the Lord our God, is talking to the woman. And he said, okay. He said, your seed that you give birth to is going to have conflict with the serpent's seed. And the serpent's seed is going to want to bite your akev, your heel. But you're going to have to crush his head. That's what the seed is going to do. And we obviously haven't done it, as Romans chapter 16 alludes to. And soon Satan will be crushed underneath your feet. Well, that was 2,000 years ago, and he's still not crushed. That's because the Apostle Paul spoke of that which is not as though it is. Romans chapter 4, verse 17. Soon Satan will be crushed under your feet. How will he be crushed under your feet? By the way you walk to your destination. And everywhere the sole of your foot will tread, that will be your inheritance. Now, if you want to choose to just sit idly by and thank God that you're saved, well, then you can expect to have an inheritance that looks like that, like somebody who sat on their Dudley do nothing for their entire spiritual walk. But if you're a person who says, you know what, I think God's doing something inside of me and I'm not quite sure where I'm going, but I'm ready to go and move forward and hear his voice and walk where he wants me to walk. That's important. So when you continue to keep reading through chapter 7, he goes through, and as I shared with you earlier this week in a Bible study, man, by being diligently guarding the commandments and doing them and the statutes and the judgments, he lists for you 10 ridiculously crazy blessings. Oh my stars, they're amazing. And that's what we talked about the other night, Monday night, verses 13 and 14. And I love how verse 15 says, he says, and the Lord will take away from you all sickness and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you know, upon you, but will lay them upon all them that hate you. Wow. Well, he made that promise all the way back in Exodus chapter 15, verse 26, when the children of Israel, now listen very carefully how this works. He said this exact same statement back in Exodus chapter 15, verse 26, when the children of Israel have come through the sea, they've defeated their enemy, and now they've sang the song of Moses, they've sang the song of Miriam, and now in verse 26, God says, as they've come to the bitter waters of Marah, to those situations in life that aren't really easy, they might make you bitter. They might just make you want to bop somebody in the nose. He says, if you'll diligently give heed to everything I'm telling you, I'll make sure that none of the diseases of Egypt come upon you. Wow. I want that. I want a group of people who want that. I want a group of people, if you'll do this, none of these diseases will come. That's why we have Faith Works, the clinic, is so that people can experience tikkun. Tikkun, T-I-K-K-U-N, tikkun means to restore, to bring back to health, restoration. That's what Faith Works is here. Spiritually, emotionally, physically, we want to restore your physical health so relationally you can be restored and financially you can continue to keep on doing what God's calling you to do so that you can help fund the kingdom work. That's what Faith Works does. That's why we do what we do. So I want to take you over to chapter 10, and I want to focus on what I was going to share with you with Moses. But before I do, I want to encourage you as to, well, why should I diligently guard the commandments and statutes and judgments? Why? I mean, yeah, all those natural physical things, yeah, that's wonderful. That's great. Good. Okay? And that's great for us collectively. But look at chapter 10, and let's pick up in verse 12 and verse 13. He says, and now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? Well, this should sound familiar to you because many of you would be familiar with Micah chapter 6, verse 8. In Micah 6, verse 8, there's a statement that's made that's almost like this. Micah actually builds on to this statement. What does the Lord require of you? To love mercy, to do justice, to walk humbly with your God. Okay, but here in verse 12, he says, now what does the Lord your God require of you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command you this day. Why? Why? Why would the Lord say collectively, I want you guys to guard the commandments? Why would the Lord say collectively, I want you to guard the statutes, to collectively guard all of the judgments? Why would he say that? And why would he say to express them through your own personality? Yeah, so you're doing it together, and he's going to personally keep the covenant with you, that's for sure, because each one of you are going to do things to different levels in the group. But why? Why does he want us to do this? Well, it's really pretty simple. For your good. One of the things we need to understand is that there's not anything in Scripture that God needs me to do to benefit him. I don't have anything that he needs of me. But at the same time, I do have something that he needs of me. And you say, well, what is that? He needs me to be his bride. He needs me to be his Edzer Kenegdo. He needs me to surround and protect him. He needs me to imitate him, to be a mirror to him, and through my actions, reflect his presence in the world around me. That's what he needs me to do. I'm always amazed. I mean, I literally am always amazed. God, who is trustworthy, takes me, who is pretty untrustworthy, comparatively speaking to him, and he gives me responsibilities. So, and me, who is untrustworthy, undependable, I don't rely upon him who's trustworthy and dependable. Oh, sometimes I just say to myself, come on, Alan. Come on. It's crazy. Okay, so to start with tonight, I wanted to share with you the opening section on collectively keeping the commandments, the statutes, the judgments as a group, linking up in arms, supporting, encouraging one another, knowing that he's going to keep individually the covenant with you based on your actions. And in this same section that we're in Deuteronomy chapter 10, if you skip down a few verses after he says, the reason why I want you to do all this is for your good, look at what he says in verse 16, but I'm going to read verses 14, 15. I want verse 16 now. Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's, your God, the earth also with all that is in it. Only the Lord had a delight in your fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, even you above all the people as it is this day. So since God has chosen you to give you his commandments, his statutes, his judgments, for you to guard them and to do them, and to testify to the world that you are chosen by God for this specific responsibility. Now notice what you're responsible for doing. He says, circumcise, therefore, the foreskin of your heart, and don't be stiff-necked. One of the misnomers that is propagated throughout much of the teaching today is that in the New Testament, the focus is on circumcising your heart, not the physical circumcision. In the Torah, people think, well, that was only physical circumcision. Nope. But in the Torah, what we find is we find three aspects of circumcision. find one that I'm responsible for circumcising my own heart, for cutting away. Let me explain. I was on a call before this call. I'm constantly learning. I'm doing the best that I can to become a better me. And as I'm doing that, I had to deal with a painful event that took place in my life years and years and years ago. And in dealing with that event, the person said to me specifically, "Will you not ever bring that up again? You're preventing yourself from moving forward." And I responded to the person, I said, "Yes, I will not bring it up again. But when you presented this one particular thing to me, it brought back a powerful memory, a painful memory, where literally I lost a boatload of money. And it was scary when that happened back years ago. And and the event was almost like deja vu. It wasn't, but it was a repeat. And I responded and I said, "Oh man, this looks all too familiar. This is where I lost a boatload of stuff." And the person, being so wise, definitely wiser than me, because they had overcome what I'm overcoming. And the person's response, will you promise me that you'll never bring this up again? This is going to hinder you from doing what you need to accomplish. And I made that promise. That's circumcising your heart. That's how you circumcise your heart. Okay, so let's make this practical. All of us have something painful in our past. All of us. And that's a tender subject. It could be right now. But for sure, in the past, we've all experienced something. So what do we do with our heart, spiritually speaking? We put a callus on it, kind of like on the pads of your hands, right there on the edge of your metacarpals. You've got those calluses, and our heart becomes calloused. It loses that sensitivity because I had something back in my past that was painful, or I've got something right now that's painful that's reminding me of my past, or I'm going through something painful right now. Okay, so let's just make an assignment. On your notes, write it down. Just write it down right now. What has hurt your heart? What is hurting your heart? What has caused a callus, a thickening of the heart? Sometimes when our physical heart doesn't get enough oxygen through the oxygenated blood, through the arteries, then the heart, the tissue, it becomes thick and it becomes less pliable to the lub-dub, 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 the beating that your heart will do. Spiritually, I'll guarantee you we've all been there. I have to testify. I was in communication with an individual this week who literally, no exaggeration, it was maybe the middle of last week. This person said to me, "Well, I'm an atheist." And I go, "Okay." I kept on just loving and teaching and sharing and speaking as though the person wasn't. I think it was yesterday, this individual sent me a note off of the morning Bible study. And the person no longer was speaking as an atheist. In fact, I told Suzanne, I go, I haven't found such great faith in all of Israel. I mean, a person who a week ago, who is boldly proclaiming atheism, now was saying, I'm standing on the faith, and describe things in an amazing way. How could that be? How could that be? How can I overcome the pain of my past mistakes, the pain of things that have happened to me? Well, I'm going to be responsible for circumcising my heart, taking an object, a knife that's very, very sharp, and I'm going to have to peel away the callus. Here's the problem, and this is where it gets scary, and you just need to face it. When you circumcise your heart, you're removing the foreskin of your heart. You're removing that callus. And what you're doing, listen carefully with your heart open in the deepest, deepest way. What you're doing is you're making yourself vulnerable again. That's what you're doing when you circumcise your heart. When you circumcise your heart. Now, Jeremiah tells us that later on in the Messianic era, God's going to circumcise your heart, and he's going to do a whole lot better job than me. And of course, the third aspect is the circumcision of your skin. And as I was sharing with a person this week, by birth, by God's design, women, girls, are circumcised as they come out of the womb. The foreskin is already folded back on the vaginal orifice by God's design for a particular reason, because of the role that the woman's got, to be completely devoted, to become an Ezer Kenegdo for the husband. That's not even a decision she gets to make. That's a decision that's made for her by the way she's designed. Versus circumcision, the male circumcision, is something that I get to choose, or I get to choose for my kids, or my parents chose for me. Circumcision of the heart is a choice I have to make. And I have to remind myself when I feel that ugly pain coming from the past, wanting to creep up and say, you really didn't circumcise your heart, did you? I need to go back and make sure I'm dependent upon him so I can guard and do his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes. Now look at chapter 10. And this is what I want to focus in on with you in the remaining, 30 minutes? In the remaining time, I want to talk about Moses. And I want to share with you something that is going to be super duper practical for you. And I shared with you earlier, if I was taking notes on this, I would put it in a picture form. I mean, you can try to write all the notes, but it'd probably be easier if you just draw pictures. So let's pick up in chapter 10. At the time, the Lord said unto me, hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first. Now, at that time, what time was that? This was in Exodus chapter 34, verses 1 and 2. So at that time, I'm just going to read for you Exodus 34, 1 and 2. And the Lord said unto Moses, hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and I will write upon these 2 tables the words that were in the first table, which you broke, and be ready in the morning, and come up in the morning unto Mount Sinai. Present yourself there to me in the top of the mount. Because at that time, you say, well, what time was that? Well, it was at the time of the golden calf. So you remember, the children of Israel have applied the blood of the lamb in Egypt. They were engulfed in the cloud. They went through the sea. They came up on the other side of the sea, and they've come to Mount Sinai. When Moses went up into the mount for the 40-day period, The children of Israel, at the end of that period of time, they made a golden calf through the work of Aaron. And when they did that, okay, Moses came down, and when he came down from the mount, he said, "Oh, my stars, what have these guys done?" He took the 2 tablets of stone and he broke them. He took the golden calf, he added the golden calf into the water, and then he made the people drink, and 3,000 died. So in chapter 10 of Deuteronomy, at that time, that's the story. So we're back in Exodus 32, 33, and 34. So now Moses broke the 2 tablets of stone. Now, I want you to pay close attention in verse 1. I don't know what your version says, but the King Jimmy says, "At that time the Lord said unto me, hew thee 2 tables of stone." So I want you to either circle or highlight or make a note of the word hew. It might say hewn, or it might say cut out or carve out for yourself 2 tables of stone. So that's what Moses is going to have to do. He now is going to have to cut out 2 tablets of stone. Now, you see this word hew? So on your notes, whatever word you've got, we all have the same Hebrew word, and the Hebrew word that we have is pasal. If I was going to spell it for you, be P-E-S-A-L, pasal. So to hew out, to cut. Well, the word pasal also is a word which means leftover chips. And you go, what? So get the picture. The children of Israel are making a golden calf to replace Moses, not to replace God. To replace Moses, because they don't know what's happened to Moses. Moses comes down from the mountain. He's hot as a firecracker. And he says, boom, he breaks the 2 tablets of stone. That's what he does. The 2 tablets of stone that God made. So if I was doing my notes, I would draw 2 tablets, and I put little squigglies on there for the 10 Devarim, the 10 words. That's what I would do. And then what I would do is I'd say, he broke them. Just make a note. Moses broke these. Now those tablets, make a note, God made those. And God wrote on them with his finger. And his finger is the Holy Spirit. So the original tablets made out of the foundation that the throne of God sits on sapphire, these 2 stones, these 2 tablets that have writing on them that God wrote, God cut them, God wrote on them, and Moses broke them. Now, they were broken to pieces. They were broken to pisoles. If I was going to spell this for you, so remember I just told you the word hewn or cut out or carve for yourself or dig out, whatever your version says, is pasal, P-E-S-A-L. But the word for broken chips is the word pasoles. It's spelled P-E-S-O-L-E-S, pasal, pasoles. It's the word for leftover chips. So now get this picture. I have 2 tablets of stone, and on your picture, make sure that you know that they're made of sapphire. From the very foundation of God's mountain that his throne sits upon. And God carved these out, he cut them out, and wrote on them, and Moses broke them. Now, these two tablets of stone are now into hundreds and thousands of pieces. Now, the text goes on and says, he says, and make you an ark of wood. I need you to make an ark for these. Now, the way the Hebrew reads is it reads just the way it reads in English. Moses was to make an ark for himself, to put these broken pieces in. Now, I will tell you that by taking these broken pieces, Moses became a very, very wealthy man. All these pieces of sapphire, that's a lot of money. Now, just keep that thought, because God told him, now I want you, Moses, you're going to have to cut out 2 new tables of stone like the ones that I did, but I made them out of sapphire. You are going to make them out of rock. But I'm going to take the same words that I put on the first set, and I'm going to put them on the second set. But all those fragmented pieces that you broke, Moses, I want you to make yourself an ark. Now, the word for ark in Hebrew is the word coffin. It's the word for a coffin. So put all the pieces together. So your drawing by now should have 2 tablets of stone made up of sapphire that God made, that God through his finger wrote, the Holy Spirit wrote on those that Moses broke. And he was told to cut out, hewn, pasal, 2 more, just like the originals. But he was supposed to make an ark for himself in order to take all the pasoles and put all those pieces in a coffin for himself to remind him of what he broke of God's. And what he broke of God's, he now put into a coffin. He never forgets his past, but that action's dead to him. Oh, you'll always remember your failures. You'll always remember your faux pas. You'll always remember your goobers, always. The question is, will they shackle me? Will they be like a ball and chain around my ankle? No, because I built an ark. And I put all of those pieces which are broken, which those individual fragments make me a wealthy man. I think we call this experience. All the wealth of the past, even the past failures, it makes me a wealthy man when I allow that to be placed into a coffin. And then I take the effort, the painstaking effort to renew those covenant pieces out of my own hands, that God, with the same fingers, going to write with the same Holy Spirit on those. So he goes on and he says, verse 2, and I'll write on the tables the words that were in the first tables, which you broke, and you shall put them in the ark. You're going to take all those pasoles all those broken pieces that are going to make you a really, really wealthy man. A really, really wealthy. If you need to go to Walmart and you need to just take a piece of sapphire. If you need to buy a plane ticket to go to Timbuktu, just take a couple pieces of sapphire. You're going to be a wealthy, wealthy man. Put them in an ark, Moses. Put them in an ark. I want you to keep those. And I made an ark of shittim wood. That's exactly what he did, just like the ark that Bezaleel and Aholiab made back in Exodus chapter 31, as they were called to make that same ark. That the difference between the two arks is the ark that Bezaleel and Aholiab made was an ark that had the Kepharet, had the two cherubim on the top, the golden seat, where the throne of God sits in between them. Moses didn't have the Kepharet, but it was made out of acacia wood. What's acacia wood? Acacia wood is a picture of humanity, the incorruptible life. The original ark that Bezaleel and Aholiab made had a box of gold on the inside, then it had a box of acacia wood, and then it had a box of gold. It had 3 boxes: gold, acacia wood, gold. Moses didn't have that. His was just acacia wood. His was just shittim wood. His was incorruptible wood. You know what's amazing? What's amazing, and on your picture, you probably have drawn an ark, and now you've got your broken pieces, and then draw an arrow that goes inside of your coffin. And now when you've got that picture in your mind, now you can remind yourself, well, what's so significant about acacia wood, shittim wood? Well, number 1, for your notes, it's called incorruptible wood. Number 2, it's when the tree is alive, you can you can carve through the bark, and it'll produce a healing salve that you can put on boo-boos, burns, and cuts, and all types of stuff, and it'll heal it, like bingo, bango, bongo. And then there's tremendous thorns. I mean, like thorns, like 4 to 6 inch thorns. Those are the types of thorns that Yeshua had around his head, with the Jerusalem thorns made from acacia trees, made from shittim. So picture Yeshua for a second. Crown of thorns, acacia, makes sense. He was wearing a crown of thorns. Pierced the side of the tree, it produces a healing salve. Oh, yeah, healing salve. His side was pierced and out flowed blood and water. It's called incorruptible, that even when you cut it down, when it dies, it never really dies. It never breaks down. It never sees corruption. Sounds like Yeshua to me. Sounds like the ark. Sounds like the coffin. That's what Moses was to make. Then he says, and he wrote on the tables according to the first writing, the 10 commandments, the 10 devarim, which the Lord spoke unto you in the mount out of the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. And I turned myself and I came down from the mountain. I put the tables in the ark, which I had made, and there they be as the Lord commanded me. Okay, I did what I was supposed to do. But I came down the mountain. I was ticked. And I broke those. But I made an ark. And I put the broken pieces in there. Now, there's debate among the scholars, and believe me, I'm not one of them. There is a debate among the scholars, and the scholars is about, okay, well, what did Moses do with all these sapphire pieces of the 2 tablets of stone that he broke? Well, I think, and the majority of the rabbis and the sages agree, and I always love listening to the rabbis and the sages that agree with me. That's the people I love to listen to. Hopefully you understood the tongue-in-cheek there. The majority say that he put those broken pieces, He built an ark for himself, but before he died, he put them into the ark. That broken pieces, as well as the 2 new tablets of stone that he hewed out and put in there, with the jar of manna and Aaron's rod. Those are the 3 things that were there. Now look at verse 6, because verse 5 and verse 6 on a time scale are actually separated by 38 years. But yet in this story, they're linked together. Notice the relationship. See, Torah never misses an opportunity to teach you a valuable lesson. The question that I have to ask myself is, am I open to learning a valuable lesson? And number 2, if I'm open to learning a valuable lesson, am I willing to conform my life to that lesson so that I can guard and do his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments? For my good always. It's a question I have to ask. They're not just going to be done by themselves. I've got to do them. So he tells us the children of Israel took their journey from Beroth of the children of Jachan to Moserah, and there Aaron died. And there he was buried, and Eleazar, his son, ministered in the priest's office in his stead. Now, if I was writing this down in my notes, what I would do is I would put over here where I have my picture of the original 2 tablets of stone. And then I have another picture of the new 2 tablets of stone. Then underneath that picture, I would put Aaron, the high priest, and then I would put Eleazar underneath the second one. You've got to ask yourself the question, why in the world would Moses follow up the story of the first tablets of stone being put to death, and Aaron, the high priest, dying, and the new tablets of stone being placed also in a coffin, the ark, and Eleazar now being responsible for taking on the role of the high priest? The first was done away with, and the second was established. But the second that was established is identical to the first. The difference is that now in the second, I'm responsible for hewing out the tablets of stone. Moses was responsible for walking up the mountain with Aaron when Aaron died, burying Aaron, and then laying his hands on Eleazar and giving the priesthood into Eleazar and bringing Eleazar down and announcing to everybody, here's your new high priest. The stories are there connected to tell you about something. There was nothing wrong with the first set of tablets. God made them. God wrote with his finger on them the 10 words, the ketubah, the marriage covenant. Aaron is a friend of the bride. Aaron was responsible for being the liaison between the bride and God. Moses is a friend of the bridegroom. Aaron was the connector between the people. The 2 tablets of stone were the connector of the ketubah between God and his people. But these were broken, not because they were bad, not because they were faulty, not because they were too hard to keep. Moses broke them for reasons A, B, and C, which we talked about back when we were in the book of Exodus. And Aaron has completed his task. And now I have a new set of tablets. And I have a new high priest, Eleazar. See, Eleazar, his name in Hebrew, El, God, Edzer, helper, God is my helper. Maybe that's what we're supposed to be doing when we're being called as a high priest. Or, sorry, scratch that idea. Maybe that's the concept we need to hold on to when God's calling us to be a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a chosen generation, that we are to constantly recognize that God is our helper. Huh. Yeah. And he renewed the message of the covenant on the tablets of stone made by Moses. And I'll let you do some thinking on that. So, how would I go to bed tonight? Or for John Akuti, or for anybody in Pakistan or India or Africa that's watching this on Shabbat, how would I go into my next 12 hours? Well, this is what I will do. And this is what I would encourage you to do. I would encourage you, go back and think about how God made a covenant with you a coon's age ago, or it might be of recent, and you accepted that. But then somehow, some way, through your behavior, you broke what those tablets represented, the covenant relationship between you and Yahweh. But in your breaking those, now you became incredibly rich. And so you built a coffin based on your past experience, and you put those in the coffin. And now you kept those with you, never forgetting your past, always taking inventory where you are, and never forgetting about where you're going. So you hewn out, think about, okay, I'm going to put out the effort to hewn out what the first two stones represented by God's doing. Now I'm going to imitate God and do the same thing and say, this is the covenant relationship that I want renewed with you. And then watch God do his work inside of you. And he'll take his finger and he'll write on it. And if that's confusing to you, let me finish up and take you over to Matthew. So let me take you over to Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12, when Yeshua is being accused of casting out demons by Beelzebub, and he says, well, if I'm casting out demons by Beelzebub, then who in the world are you guys casting them out by? So look at what he says here. I'm picking up in verse 25 of Matthew chapter 12. And Jesus knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. This probably sounds familiar from your morning study. And if Satan cast out Satan, he's divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? And if I by Beelzebub cast out devils, by whom do your children cast them out? Therefore they shall be your judges. But if I cast out devils by the Spirit of God. Did you see that? So you might want to either like underline that. So like take your pen and put, underline or highlight it or circle it or do whatever on the Spirit of God. Then if you go over to the book of Luke, go over to Luke chapter 11. In Luke chapter 11, verse 20, notice what he says. Same story. Pharisees, same story, same accusation, same everything. But look at verse 20. But if I, with the finger of God, cast out demons, then the kingdoms come to you. See, the finger of God in chapter 11, verse 20, is the same as the Spirit of God in Matthew chapter 12, verse 28. The Spirit of God is the finger of God. So when God wrote on the 2 tablets of stone with his finger, he wrote it with the Spirit. So people say, oh, the Torah is bondage. It's legalism. I'll go, you're calling what the Spirit of God wrote in tablets of sapphire stone bondage and legalism? Oy vey. Not very smart. But we say those types of comments not because that's what we really believe, but that's what we've been taught. And so we parrot what we've been taught. And that's why it's my goal that when I'm sharing with you, I'm trying to teach you not what to think, but just saying, well, can you draw your conclusions as to what the text is really saying? So when Moses made his 2 new sets of stones, the same finger of God, the same Spirit of God wrote upon them when the covenant was renewed. And if we went back to Exodus chapter 35, as soon as God took those 2 tablets of stones and he renewed the covenant and he wrote on it with his fingers, bingo, bango, bongo, as soon as Moses comes down again, guess what? Immediately they start building the tabernacle. Immediately. But what about the pain of their past? What about the golden calf? What about the disappointment that they disappointed God? What about their poor marriage to God? Yep, they forgot it. It was now broken sapphire pieces. And now through their experience, they become very wealthy. Now they're ready to move forward and to build a tabernacle that God can dwell in. Amen and amen. Let me end the call, wish you a great Shabbat, and open it up for any comments or any questions that you might have. And Shabbat Shalom.